Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Community. Hello, Maria.
Hello.
I always love when you're here because it's so fun. We actually should do, and we're not going to do this today because I think we're episoded out, but we should do like another Call Her Daddy.
Community.
Call Her Daddy spinoff. Where we talk about nothing. People love that one.
We talk about nothing.
It wasn't nothing, but it was like no script.
I love that.
So fun. We should do it sometime. So I am so excited because we are going to talk about something that kind of comes up a lot with Social Business Club members, and actually I think comes up a lot with entrepreneurs like regularly everywhere, and it's this idea of building in the dark. And so often when, we're building, whether it be on social or we're building a course or we're building a membership or whatever it is that we're building, there is a level of us building we feel like there's a need for secrecy. Like we're feeling like we need to keep things under wraps or keep it kind of tight. And I actually think the trend on that is changing, especially on social, to actually change to be more forward and about really kind of building in the light and really showing up fully so that people are able to really be part of the journey. So I wanted to see kind of what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I love this topic. I think also building could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be a podcast, anything you're working on. And this is something I've fallen victim to so many times, especially at the beginning, where I was we just have to figure out what these people want and create this perfect thing and make the sales page and get all the messaging and get the offer down and do all these things and have it all ready and then just present it to the world as this perfect, polished, beautiful thing that's I think perfect is really the right word. Here it is, everybody. And then everyone's kind of oh, okay, maybe we didn't want that, or maybe we're actually not that interested in that, or maybe we love the content of that, but the way it's delivered isn't really the way we were expecting, or right? And so I think leading up until probably even maybe 2020, the way of doing marketing and appearing on social was very aesthetic feed and everything's perfect and here's my offer, look how polished it is. And more and more and more, it's just going so far away from that, I think, in terms of all content, but especially what we're talking about today, which is the building phase. And so I think when you're thinking of building something, do not do what I said, which is just build the whole thing in the dark. Don't tell anybody about it. Don't ask anybody about it. Don't mention it's even happening. And then one day just throw it out into the world. We have done that, and it does not go very well.
No, it flopped. It flopped. And honestly, that is more I think your style than mine, which isn't a bad thing. My style's better than yours, and that's now the way that everyone should be working. But I'm more a come with me kind of person, while you are so elegant in the stuff that you do.
Thanks.
Your stuff is always so beautiful. Well, I'm messy, right? We always talk about this. Even we were laughing yesterday because Maria came and worked at my house, and I left a candle lit for 10 hours, and then she was like, "This is a type B thing," So we laugh about this, but it's so true. I'm I'm okay with things not being polished. Actually, I got a piece of feedback one time, and I remember being so offended, and now I'm in gratitude about it. But I started a new job. This was the last job I ever had, and the guy said to me, "You're so okay with mediocre." And I was like, "Oh my God." And he was like, "No, you're okay with it not being perfect. You're okay with just trying things and seeing if it works without attachment." And I think that's really been, I think, helpful to our success, because it's been easy for us to be well, that offer didn't work. Well, why don't we try something else? Or that offer. And I think for you, you put so much intensity into all the things you do that it has to look beautiful and it has to move the needle. And I'm kind of I think this will be fine. Why don't we just try it, right? And even this podcast, when we launched it, I had this idea, and then 2 weeks later, I was like, it's time.
Here it is, guys.
Yeah, I had a cold, as I recorded the intro the first time, and Maria was like, why don't you just wait? And I was like, because I can't. I can't wait. But so there's a happy medium between the two of us. But I think this idea of us showing up and building publicly, it allows people to be with us, and they're really bought into what we're doing, as we're doing it before we even sell it. So before you're asking anyone for $1, you're showing people behind the scenes. You're showing them inside the sausage, which is always the one I use. You're showing them what's going on so that they're ready to make a really informed choice.
Yeah, totally. And I do think I totally agree. I love the messy action. I'm working on it, work in progress. And
Me too.
I do think there's a time and place for the perfectionism, not perfectionism, but you know what I mean? The elegance, the sophistication, the making things look beautiful, the making things, really well done and professional, whatever. But the time and place for that is not the building phase.
Yes,
that
totally.
I think is the big difference here, and that's what I've learned is because the mistake people make is you create this thing that you think is so perfect and polished, and you spend all this time and energy on, and you put it out into the world, and people don't receive it the way you think because you didn't build it with them. And this has been transformational for us in our business, is like, so building in the light, like telling our audience, oh, we're thinking of doing this, we might do this, getting their feedback along the way.
Yeah.
But also like integrating everything they're saying into what we're actually building. That's the like flip side of it. So I think there are so many positives. Maybe we can go into the positives of like building in the light and why we think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side of that, you actually also get all the live feedback. And then that's the game-changing thing, is that then you implement that into what you're building. And then what you're building ends up being so much more in alignment with your audience, and they're way more likely to buy it.
Well, I even think like one of the main reasons, or the pros, and you've kind of touched on this already, is like that feedback from your ideal clients, right? So when you're building something and you're like, I always use this example of a retreat, but like we did one retreat a few years ago, and I loved the retreat, and I wanted to do a second one. I had such a good time. And we tried to pitch a winter retreat, and people were like, are you joking? Like, no winter retreat here in Canada. Like, our audience wasn't quite what it is now, like whatever. And I was so disappointed, but I was like mid-booking an Airbnb. Like, I was like, oh my God, like I've coordinated this whole retreat. And then we did a winter retreat this year, and it was easy to sell, right? Because I had enough audience, I had enough like kind of like trust. And it took time, but we were like, what do people think about this Airbnb? We would do a poll. We did private invitations to people before we started selling it to see what people's feedback was. Like, so people would respond back being like, love that, hate the date. Like, oh, love that, like calling when it's snowy. Like, oh, love that, like, this, and this. Like, we were able to get that feedback. So I think that's like one of the biggest pieces is like, and you're often building like kind of like a wait list for whatever you're doing. So I always say that, like, I'm like, if you're doing anything, like building a wait list so that this way you're getting those people while they're in the FOMO and while they're in the like excitement of it. And they're like, yeah, this is something I'd want to be a part of.
Yeah. And it also, like what you said about the first retreat, like when you're about to click book on the Airbnb and we put a poll that's like, would you love to come to this retreat? And every single person votes no.
Yeah.
Like,
that was tough.
But could you imagine if we booked the Airbnb, booked the private chef, planned the entire weekend, set up all these vendors, and then put it out and was like, hey guys, we have this awesome retreat. Look at all the cool stuff about it. It's sick. It's going to be so fun. And then no one buys it. Then you're not only stuck with all these like commitments you've made to vendors and things like that, but you've just wasted so much time and energy like making the sales page, like all of the time that you've invested in creating that offer, right? So I think that feedback piece is like huge, because then you can actually figure out what your audience wants and then implement that feedback. And that's what we learned with our course too. Like we ran a course where we taught people how to do Instagram, and as we were building it with them, we're doing a beta group, and they're like what we thought they valued and what they actually valued were two totally different things.
It was nuts. Actually, like that's gonna be like an example I think we use for like the rest of time.
Yeah.
Because what we thought people valued was knowledge.
Yes.
We were
education. Here's how you do it, guys.
We're like, here are these modules. Want more modules? More modules to come. Like, we were like obsessed with making these modules. And then they would come to these calls and they would be obsessed with each other and like the coaching.
And the community.
Yes. And we were like, oh.
We almost didn't even include the community as part of it.
Yes. And then when we launched our membership, we were like, did we put the modules in there? And people do watch them. I think we get some traction on them. It's the live calls people are after. You guys, Social Business Club people, you're after the live calls. We know it. We know it. So it's like, and if you haven't join the socialbusinessclub.ca, use the code podcast for your first month for $1. Amazing community in there where we talk all things social. But like, what was amazing about that was that we really learned that it was like people were actually wanted more access. And so, but if we had just been like so head down, not taking feedback, not doing a beta, building like really, really in the dark, which we kind of did. We built this in the dark.
Yeah.
I think we probably wouldn't have even gotten to the point with the membership.
And I think too, the thing with when you're building and getting the feedback in live time, you kind of also need to know like what questions to ask people. Because I feel like when we were building our course sort of in the dark, we were asking people like what they would want from it, but it was almost so vague that they like couldn't really tell us.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, hey, what would you want from a social media course? They might say, oh, I might want to learn this or I might want to learn that. Like, what if we asked them like, we're designing a social media course. It's going to have, templates. It's going to have a really educational component where you can watch videos. And then there's also going to be a community component where there's like live calls and you can be in this group and chat with other entrepreneurs. Like, of those things, which would be the most valuable to you?
Yeah.
That's a very different question, right?
Totally.
So as you're building, thinking of these pieces and getting that feedback is so great. And then why don't we talk about like what are the other benefits to building in the light?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one is like, you know, again, getting that feedback. The other thing is really just like people want to be part of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been really cool in us watching like even our business. Like the other day I was in the office and this woman came by who like I don't really know that well. And she was like, oh my God, I used to work with you at the university. I was like, yeah, I totally remember that. And she was like, oh my God, this was like a little side hustle you put together. And like, this is crazy. And I was like, yeah, it is kind of crazy. Like, this has turned into so much, but people want to be part of your journey. People want to be part of your success. And I think that's something we really underestimate as humans is that we think that, like, almost like people don't want to see us be successful. Like, that's always kind of our default is, like, negativity. And I think really, like, we need to lean into the fact that people, like, want to be part of the journey because if they don't need you today, they might need you tomorrow. And so if you're continuing to be kind of top of mind for people, that's really great. And even Erin Spivak, who's one of our newer mentors, the founder of Hush Blankets, like, they're building the Founders Club. They have never built a community. Like, they're very open about it, right? Like, Aaron's like, I literally am like a blanket man. Like, I built these blankets.
And those are some good blankets.
There's some great blankets. And he's done some other really cool stuff, too. But so he talks about these blankets and all of that. And he's doing stuff with, you know, all this other stuff. Nothing ever community-oriented, right? So he's being very humble and saying, like, I'm learning. Right? And even, like, when we do our onboarding calls, they ask us. They're like, what kind of feedback do you have? Like, what do you like? And I was like, hey, like, I actually really like this. This is a lot of guys. And they were like, oh, and I was like, I've never been part of a community with so many men, which is the norm in business. I'm just so used to networking with women.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, that's interesting. We're actually 60-40. We didn't realize. And like, it was so interesting. Like, but like, it was such a good opportunity for them to have a conversation, but they're building forward, right? They're asking for feedback. They're asking for us what we think. So I think for us, it's like the same thing where it's like, one of the hugest advantages, apart from getting feedback from people, is really just like kind of that show up and watching. Like, I can't wait until Founders Club has 1 million people in it or 100,000 people in it. And along the way, we've been watching, the first retreat. Oh, you watched this.
Yeah.
And there's something about getting it on the ground. Everyone wants to get it on the ground on something.
Yeah. And I think when you operate that way and when you're like two big things coming to mind right now that I think are both like game changers, could be game changers in your business. One is like authenticity is queen right now.
Yep.
The content that's doing well on social, like literally last week I did an experiment where I created 2 extremely beautiful posts about my trip to Tulum, and the photography was great, and I edited them beautifully, and I added this like cute text and little icons, and they were so stunning. And there wasn't much story behind them. They were more just like aesthetic, beautiful, whatever. And those took me like hours. And then I posted
Couldn't be me.
a photo, like a series of photos of my mom and I that I literally put together in 2 minutes, wrote a quick caption that was like, happy birthday, threw it up. And it got way more engagement and views than the other 2 posts.
Yeah.
So it's like people want that like authentic content that's not super polished, that's real, that they can relate to, that makes you feel like you're like a friend of theirs, you know?
Yeah.
And like it turns them into a fan who wants to buy things from you and all those other great things. But it also makes your content go so far because that's the content that's performing well right now. Like that's what people want to see. They're sick of this like polished, perfect little social media thing that we had going on basically from the start of social media until a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I think more and more that type of content is what's resonating with people, and like you're just going to go so much further with that type of thing. And then also when you're building it at the end, when you put it out into the world, you have all these people who felt like they built it with you and are invested and were along for the ride and like either want to buy it or tell their friends about it or whatever they do, right? So I think that's so big. And then the second thing that was coming up for me when you're talking is like when you operate that way, you don't have to pretend to be something you're not.
Yeah.
And this killed me at the beginning of our business. This was like, I think one of the biggest reasons I hit burnout so hard was because I was trying to pretend we knew all these things about business and we're super professional and we're perfect and like didn't swear and didn't do this and didn't do that. And that's not a good way to show up as a person, to try to be something you're not and like put on this facade of whatever that looks like, right? Yeah. But when you're just honest and you're like exactly what you said about Aaron, like he's like, I'm just trying this out. I'm doing my best, but I'm here every day and I'm listening to your feedback and like I've never grown a community before. I'm not going to pretend I have, but he's just being so authentically himself that when you're operating that way, you're just going to be more successful as a business owner because you don't have this distance between who you actually are and who you're pretending to be when you show up in your business.
Totally. And I think it's so easy, especially at the beginning, to feel that. And like when you're building, I even remember at the beginning when we started the social snippet, we created the social snippet Instagram, and we were like, we need to grow this following fast because who's gonna like work with us if they see we have 100 followers?
And someone literally said that to me.
Yeah, it was rude. We're coming for people. Someone also told Maria to break up with me. So
Hot take. I was like, if anything, she should break up with me.
No way. We're in it for life. I'm always like, Maria, the next business, this is what's happening. So she's like, can you do one without me? Just like one.
You always need a side project.
Yeah. I always need a side hustle. But right now it's growing a child. That's my side hustle.
Love that for you.
But it's I think for us, it's like really like, yeah, like it's been like an interesting thing where at the beginning we were like, we need to grow our account fast because we need to show people how we can do it and we know how to do it and like blah, blah, blah. And then we were kind of like, why? And clients were coming to us when we had 100 followers, asking us to manage social media. And we were getting asked to do stuff with 200 followers and 500 followers, 1,000 followers. And now I think we're like maybe 4,500 followers or something like that, maybe even a little less. And it's like, do we get leads on social? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because we're at least 1 step ahead, 2 steps ahead, 3 steps ahead, 4,000 steps ahead, like whatever that looks like. And so I think like not putting that pressure on yourself, like to be like, of course, there's things out there where you're not going to buy things like, you know, you become a business coach and you've never run a business. Like that's probably like not a good fit. But I think it's like that constant, persistent pressure to be perfect and be like, you know, 8-figure business owner or whatever, like 3 years in a row, I've wanted us to hit 7 figures. Like 3 years in a row, and we just missed it. And like, and I'm like, oh, like I could be like, oh, that sucks. But also, I know most businesses fail by this point.
Yeah.
And like,
amen.
And the amount of businesses that like women-led businesses that like make 7 figures, less than 1%. So it's like that. Look, we're still beating all the odds, but it's still so easy to look at other things, right? So I think for us, it's just remembering, like, you know, when you're building publicly, you get to bring all these people with you and they get to celebrate your success. And there's gonna be cringy moments. There's gonna be things you do that are cringy. And, you know, sometimes I'll like see that like people will share posts and I'm like, they didn't share to their stories. They probably shared in the DMs. Like, you know, who was this? And I know who it is. But it's just remembering like, this is the joy of building publicly because 5 years from now, we're going to be able to be like, hey, you guys remember when we were in that office in Waterloo and then now we have this? Or, you know, like we're able to really like kind of bring people along.
Yeah. And your audience comes on that journey with you. And there's advantages at all parts of the journey, right? That's the part I missed so strongly in the beginning is like, I thought if we were authentic about how small we were and how new we were, it would turn people away. But there were advantages to being that small and there were advantages to being that new. Like we've never worked harder than we did that first year. And, you know, it was like we were so eager, we were learning
people worked with
so
us.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there were so many advantages to where we were at and I was trying to pretend we were further along and that distance just doesn't do well for you or your business.
Yeah.
So
well, I love this. This is such a good conversation. I think for those of you who need encouragement about like where you're at, even if it's this is your day one, like not comparing it to, you know, our day 1,000, like it's probably actually what we are, like close. But, you know, don't compare yourself to other people. But I think, you know, really just showing up consistently, there's nothing to be ashamed of there. And I think just showing up and showing like what you're excited about. And if you are starting a business that you're really passionate and excited about, people are going to want to see that.
And there's no wrong way to do it. Like, how do you build in the light? You just build. You're posting stories, you're asking people, you're showing them what you're up to. You're just taking them along for the journey, and that can look however you want it to look, but just bring them along with you.
Yeah. Well, Maria, love you. I love building with you.
Love ya.
So
love
fun.
building in the light with you.
More building in the light from us.
Yes.
To come.
Stay tuned for the next Call Her Community episode.
We will take all questions that we can actually do a Q&A.
Ooh, that would be so fun.
Okay, we're going to do a Q&A. If you listen to this podcast, send us any questions that you have.
Yeah, Spotify comments, Instagram DMs, wherever you can find us, shoot us a question, and we're going to do a Q&A episode. That would be so fun.
Done.
Yay.
Yay.